The Benin Empire Trilogy. The Empire That Refused to Die. In 1897, British soldiers broke into a palace in West Africa and found something that shattered everything Europeans thought they knew about African civilization. Walls lined with bronze plaques so sophisticated, so beautiful, that the invaders couldn't believe Africans made them. Some claimed they must be from ancient Egypt. Others said Atlantis. They were wrong. What they'd stumbled into was the remains of an empire that had refused to die for over 800 years. An empire with technology Europe didn't even have. An empire whose secrets would rock the foundations of colonial lies. This is the story of the Benin Empire, and it's nothing like what you were taught. Echoes of Africa, HFK. Today, we are uncovering 4 forbidden truths. How Benin mastered bronze before Europe's Renaissance. Why their walls were 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China. The spiritual technology that held an empire together for centuries. And the one weakness that would eventually bring them down. Let's dive in. The empire Europe tried to erase. While Europe was still crawling out of the Dark Ages, Obayuwe the Great stood atop walls that stretched for over 16,000 kilometers. Yes, you heard that right. The walls of Benin, the largest earthwork in the world, made the Great Wall of China look like a garden fence. But here's what they don't tell you in history class: these weren't just walls. They were a statement. A declaration that said, we are organized. We are powerful. We are untouchable. Inside those walls, a city so advanced that European visitors described it as rivaling their greatest capitals. Wide, straight streets. Multi-story buildings. A palace complex that took your breath away. And here's the kicker: while Europe was burning witches and dumping waste in the streets, Benin had a sophisticated bureaucracy, a standing army, and artists creating bronze sculptures using the lost wax technique so advanced that even today, we're studying how they did it. Pattern interrupt. But wait. If Benin was so powerful, so advanced, why haven't you heard about it? Hold that thought, because the answer will make you question everything you learned about African history. The bronze that broke European minds. Picture this: it's the 15th century. Portuguese traders arrive in Benin expecting to find another primitive African society they can exploit. Instead, they meet Obayuwe, a king who speaks multiple languages, leads a court of scholars and artists, and lives in a palace decorated with thousands of bronze plaques depicting the empire's history. The Portuguese are stunned. They write home describing Benin City as great and comparing it favorably to Lisbon. They are not conquerors here, they are guests. Sometimes even subordinates. Now here's where it gets interesting. The Benin bronzes, those masterpieces that would later be looted, weren't just art. They were technology. Historical records. Political statements. Each plaque told a story: military victories, royal ceremonies, diplomatic relationships. They were Instagram before Instagram existed, TikTok before TikTok, a way to broadcast power and preserve memory. The bronze casting technique. So sophisticated that it required knowledge of metallurgy, mathematics, and artistic vision that wouldn't appear in Europe for another century. Scientists still study these techniques today. And that's just the metal. Let's talk about the empire's real power. Open loop. Because what held Benin together for 800 years wasn't just military might or artistic genius. It was something deeper. Something spiritual. Something that would later become both their greatest strength and their fatal weakness. The spiritual technology. At the heart of Benin was the Oba, not just a king, but a divine figure. Part political leader, part spiritual anchor. The Oba didn't just rule the empire, he was the empire. His spiritual power, his connection to the ancestors, his performance of sacred rituals, these weren't just ceremonies. They were the operating system that kept everything running. Think about it like this: in the West, we separate church and state. In Benin, they were inseparable. The Oba's authority came from the gods, and his legitimacy was reinforced through elaborate festivals, sacrifices, and rituals that involved the entire kingdom. Every guild, every craft, every profession was organized under this spiritual political system. The bronze casters. They worked for the Oba, creating art that glorified his reign and recorded history. The warriors. They fought in his name, blessed by rituals before battle. The traders. They paid tribute that flowed through a system sanctified by ancestral blessings. This wasn't superstition. This was social engineering. It created loyalty, identity, and cohesion across thousands of square kilometers and multiple ethnic groups. For centuries, this system was unbreakable. The empire expanded, contracted, adapted, survived. Neighboring kingdoms fell. European powers came and went. But Benin endured. Until tension built. Until the very thing that made them strong became the crack in their armor. Because when you build an empire on divine authority, what happens when that authority is questioned? What happens when betrayal comes from within? The cracks begin to show. By the late 1800s, the world was changing. European powers weren't just traders anymore, they were colonizers, carving up Africa like a birthday cake. The Berlin Conference of 1884 drew lines on maps, claiming ownership of lands they'd never seen, people they'd never met. Benin watched from behind its walls. Still powerful. Still independent. Still defiant. But here's what most people miss: the British didn't defeat Benin in open battle at first. They couldn't. Benin's army was too strong, their fortifications too sophisticated. So they did what colonial powers always do when they can't win by force. They waited for division. They watched for weakness. They found ambitious men who wanted power. They made promises. They planted seeds of betrayal. And inside the palace, something was shifting. Not all the chiefs were happy with Oba Ramon. Some saw the writing on the wall: European domination was coming, and they wanted to be on the winning side. Some wanted more power for themselves. Some genuinely believed cooperation with the British was the only path to survival. The unity that had held for 800 years was fracturing. And the British knew it. The cliffhanger set up. In 1896, a British delegation decided to visit Benin during a sacred festival, a time when outsiders were forbidden to enter the city. The Oba sent messages: "Don't come. This is not the time." But the British ignored the warnings. They came anyway. What happened next would give the British the excuse they'd been waiting for. What happened next would lead to one of the most brutal punitive expeditions in colonial history. What happened next would end an 800-year empire in blood and fire. But the question that haunts historians to this day is this: who really wanted the British dead? Was it the Oba protecting his sacred festival? Or was it someone else, someone who knew that British deaths would force a war that would change everything? That's where we'll pick up in part 2, the betrayal that broke an African empire from the inside. If you want to know who betrayed Benin, why they did it, and how it all fell apart, you need to watch the next episode. Drop a like if this blew your mind, subscribe so you don't miss part 2, and comment below: do you think the 1897 massacre was ordered by the Oba or by someone trying to overthrow him? I'll see you in the next one.